Good evening and welcome to another session of Fresh Natural Live. It's Monday evening and we have a wonderful show tonight. Tonight I decided to do a simple informal discussion. I received an email from a friend. It was regarding a common herbicide, pesticide that many of you are aware of, glyphosate. And it's used, most people know it to be used in a popular weed killer known as Roundup. But this email had reference to a petition and wanted us to sign on about getting glyphosate totally banned. And I've heard a lot of talk about glyphosate. And we often talk about consuming natural food in its natural state. So what it is, I went online and did, a search, and there was some talk about glyphosate in different platforms. I even found an article that recommended that glyphosate, or proposed that glyphosate was useful and safe in the environment. I'm not going to go through the details of that, but I decided to look at an article by WebMD. Lots of people search WebMD. They seem to be middle of the road, more conservative. They tend to be more along the lines of what the standard industry recommendations are. So I thought they would be a good pseudo-neutral site. So we'll go through this basic outline by WebMD. Some of my colleagues have a little more insight into glyphosate than I do, and we hope to get some of their insight and recommendations. But I think it's going to be a fun discussion. I'm going to share my general thoughts, not just about glyphosate, but about chemicals and toxins in our food in general. So I think we need to not just so much focus on a single molecule necessarily, but also think about the broad scope of what we consume and how we consume things in our body. So stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting discussion tonight. I look forward to getting your feedback.
Hello, everyone. I guess Dr. Montgomery stepped away or he got logged out. So we will hold. I'll try to give him a call to see what's going on.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Now I want Dr. Palmer. Dr. Palmer, can you say something? I'm having trouble with my mic.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I can't hear you. So hold on one second. Let me change not my mic, but my speakers. This is the second time this has happened to me. Okay, now say something, Dr. Palmer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, hold on one second. Let me try my speakers again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. Let me try one more thing. I'm sorry, audience. We are going to get this. Camera's good. Let's see. Audio. Okay. How about now, Dr. Palmer?
I can still hear you. I think you just are having difficulty hearing me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's coming through my other speaker, but you know what? We'll make it work.
Okay. But you sound fine.
Okay, good. All right, so I can hear you fine. So anyway, guys, sorry about the technical difficulties there. My speaker is it's not coming through my regular speakers. I'm gonna try one more option on the speaker. So communication speaker, that one's not. Let me go back to the default speaker. How about that, Dr. Palmer?
You still sound fine.
Yeah,
I
that
don't,
one's not working. So let me go back to this other, my secondary speaker. This is really weird because uh, let me try this. How about that?
still the same on this end, but I don't know what do I sound
Okay.
like.
Yeah, I hear it's coming through my secondary speaker. That's okay. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. I'm gonna turn my phone off. So anyway, as I was talking about, we're talking about glyphosate, and what I want to do is start with uh, the discussion and WebMD. And many of you've looked online about glyphosate. There's a lot of information on glyphosate. There's some pretty good scientific articles. I've skimmed a few. But what I want to do is talk about the basic stuff on glyphosate. Dr. Palmer, I want to get your input on it. And I'd like to come up with a game plan for our audience in terms of how we should not only treat glyphosate, but how we should think about all of these chemicals that are used in our environment. So let's first talk about glyphosate. And the question I want us to raise or try to address is, should glyphosate be totally banned? So herbicides and your health. So where's glyphosate used? It's the world's most common. And let me just put this here. World's most common herbicides. One of the world's most common herbicides. Active ingredients are popular in weed control products like Roundup, Rodeo, Pondmaster. Many farmers use it during food production. It's often used on fruit and vegetable crops, glyphosate-resistant crops like canola, corn, cottonseed, soybean, sugar beets, and wheat, planting lawns, greenhouses, aquatic plants, and forest plants. So pretty widely used. Now, I want to pause there because you have a chemical substance, and Dr. Palmer, feel free to chime in and interject at will. But what I want us to do is pause there. So because I want us to not only look at just the nuances, because sometimes we have to back up and look at the forest and not just the trees. And so this discussion, I want us to use some level of common sense, because oftentimes we get into a lot of scientific minutia in talking about these things, and we lose sight of common sense. So I want to delve into this. But before we do this, I want you to hit the thumbs up, the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't had a chance to, and share this with anyone you think will benefit from this information. So glyphosate, used pretty ubiquitous in Roundup, Rodeo, Pondmaster, some common herbicide, weed control products. And it's used in fruit, vegetables, also corn. Corn is very frequently used. Cotton, we wear cotton, so it's the things we wear. It's also soybeans, sugar, beets, and whole wheat. Wheat is very common. So these are common foods. So there's a certain universal application of this weed killer. It's also in plantings, lawns, greenhouses, aquatic plants, forest plantings. So these are things that we come into exposure, we are exposed to in our so-called natural environment. And we often talk about the consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables, eating a plant-based diet. We talk about getting out in nature. We talk about grounding. We talk about, camping, etc. But you have to think about, those activities in the context of what's happening to those environments. So this chemical that's used to kill weeds and applied to this resistant to plant foods that are resistant to it is very common. So we're going to come into contact with glyphosate regardless of where we go, what we consume and where we go. So exposure to glyphosate in your lawn and garden, If you use the weed killer with glyphosate on your lawn and garden, you may be exposed to glyphosate by breathing it in, okay, getting on your skin and getting your eyes. You don't have to eat the grass. In fact, you don't have to walk on the grass barefoot. You can inhale it. And so it gets in the atmosphere. It can get on your skin, get in your eyes. Eat or smoke after applying it, and don't wash your hands. You know, your risk goes up. You eat or smoke after applying it, don't wash your hands. Your risk goes up if you touch plants that are still wet from it. If you're exposed to your eyes, skin, nose, and throat, may get irritated. If you get in your eyes, it could lead to mild irritation or superficial corneal injury. So we already know that this is a toxin. So just by topical application, I remember, oftentimes, medication, other substances for topical use only, not oral use. So oftentimes things that are bad to ingest are relatively safe to use topically. But we can see here, just by application of this molecule topically, it has toxic effects. So we don't have to go into too much of the biochemistry of it. We know that the chemical compound has a toxic effect on you, even if it's applied topically. If you swallow, you may have increased saliva, burns, pain in your mouth and throat. It can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. In some cases, people with intentionally swallowed products of glyphosate have died. Okay, so already we get to this, but I don't think we need to have this line. We can see that if it's harmful topically, it can be very harmful when ingested. Now, in some cases, so that implies that there are a lot of situations where people get away from ingesting it and they don't die. To lower your risk, wash your hands and take off your clothes after you handle one of these products. So, again, very toxic. I mean, the fact that you have to remove exposure for it. But the problem is that this is in all of our foods. And so even though if we ingest it at large amounts, we can die, if we ingest it very small amounts, there can be slow, progressive damage to our bodies. You may also be exposed to glyphosate in your food. Many farmers use glyphosate products in their fields and orchards. They spray it on crops like corn and soybeans that are genetically engineered. So not only the foods genetically engineered, which may have some adverse biological effects, but toxic substances like glyphosate or sprayed onto them. And so they also spray on non-GMO crops like wheat, barley, oats, beans to dry out the crops so they can harvest them sooner. Okay, so here you're applying a chemical to dry crops out so they can be harvested sooner. That's an economic benefit, in my opinion. And so there you have something that's being chemically altered. So you're making a chemical alteration to something that's being genetically altered. So think of that. A chemical alteration to something that's being genetically altered. So it gets in the foods early in the food chain before raw food is harvested and proceed. So what foods have glyphosate? Well, you may have heard recent news that oat-based products like oatmeal cereals. How many people like to have their oatmeal in the morning, or oat cereals or oats of different types? Granola bars and snack bars have glyphosate. So these foods that are thought to be healthy, going to eat my granola bar, my oatmeal in the morning with my plant-based milk. I'll have my salad, but it's laden with glyphosate. In one report in California scientists and the World Health Organization, 43 of 45 oat-based products tested had glyphosate. Popular breakfast foods like Quaker old-fashioned oats and Cheerios have above average level. How many of you consume Cheerios to reduce your cholesterol? You can reduce your cholesterol, but you can increase your glyphosate levels. It's also in grain and bean products like pasta, buckwheat, barley, kidney beans, and chickpeas. Some foods may surprise you, like avocados, apples, blueberries, cherries, cucumbers, dates, dried peas, garlic, lemons, olives, peanuts, pomegranates. So these are all plant-based foods. These things we recommend have glyphosate in them.
There's an interesting question in the chat.
Yes.
Beta.
Okay, let's see here.
The last one.
So if it's in all our foods, then won't our bodies eventually adapt to process it? Oh, great question. Anybody want to handle that? Let me invite, and by the way, I have to invite Dr. Pam Atkins on. Dr. Atkins.
Hello, good evening. Sorry I'm late. I was having technical difficulty, but
Oh, no
glad I'm
problem.
on.
We started off with technical difficulties, so it must be must have glyphosate in our computers.
That's what we're talking
So
about.
So interesting. So Veda asked an interesting question. If it's in all our foods, then won't our bodies eventually adapt to process it? So that's a great question. So let's think about the concept of adaptation. Because our bodies, the answer is yes. Our body will always adapt to its environment. Now, uh, adaptations can have different forms, and it's a great question because I'm going to speak to adaptations in general, and then I'll then zone in on the question as it relates to glyphosate. When our bodies are forced to deal with an abnormal circumstance, so I'm going to look at heart failure patients because I deal with lots of heart failure patients. So let's say someone starts to have elevated blood pressure because they consume processed foods, salty foods, maybe glyphosate laden foods, but whatever chemicals get in a system, it causes a biochemical change, and that can be multifactorial. So that biochemical change will result in hardening of blood vessels. It may result in increase in fluid retention because the toxins that build up in the system has to be shifted outside of the cells. So you may have fluid retention. These adaptations may result in weakening the heart muscle because the toxin may have an effect on the heart muscle. So the heart muscle starts to weaken and circulation goes down. And so if circulation goes down, blood delivery to the kidney goes down. When that goes down, the kidney retains more sodium, retains more fluid, then swelling occurs. The kidney releases hormones that can increase blood pressure, such as angiotensin 2. And so you have elevated blood pressure, which puts more strain on the heart, which weakens the heart further and so forth. So the answer is yes, our body adapts. It adapts to lots of things that happen. But this chemical that gets in your system and it's building up in your system is causing a maladaptive process. A maladaptive is a bad adaptation. It's the wrong type of adaptation, or it could be an unhealthy adaptation. So just like I gave the illusion of high blood pressure, what causes high blood pressure? Well, multiple things. It's a biochemical imbalance. Well, what causes biochemical imbalance? Well, abnormal molecules, such as toxic chemicals that build up in your blood that cause what we call oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is an overall process where you have increased toxicity in the system, and then cells start to die, DNA gets damaged, and the system breaks down. So the adaptation process that occurs is not a healthy adaptation. So for instance, if you do push-ups every day, which I need to start doing soon, and you do stretching and those things, the adaptation that will occur is that you'll build muscle, you'll increase flexibility. Those are healthy adaptations. But when the body is faced with toxic chemicals, it tries to compartmentalize those toxins in fat cells or in fluid outside of tissue, i.e. swelling. But if the toxic buildup continues and persists faster than the body can get rid of it, then the adaptation process is overwhelmed by destruction at the cellular level and the tissue level. So the number one adaptation of a toxin going in is the body to wall it off, compartmentalize, and dispel it. But if too much of the toxin gets in, like you're eating corn and oatmeal every day that has glyphosate in it every day, when the glyphosate levels build up, then the glyphosate's not dispelled fast enough. And so you have an abnormal adaptation. It gets put aside, just like instead of sweeping the dirt and throwing it out in the trash, you just cover it up. And so the body's not able to get the toxins out fast enough, so it covers it up. And what the toxins inside the body causes what we call free radicals, which then floats around and destroys cells, destroy DNA, and you have an abnormal adaptation process known as chronic disease, be it high blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, or any other kind of chronic illness. Anybody else want to comment on that question? That's a great question. So yes, the body will adapt, but it won't necessarily be in a healthy manner. So that's laugh out loud. So anyway, so back to is it an organic food? So to limit your exposure to bioorganic products, my colleague Dr. Pam Atkins been on me for years about going organic, and we've been organic and sustainable at the Garden Kitchen for the last perhaps 2.5 years. We had a few hiccups recently, but I'd say the last 2 years we've done pretty well with that. But that doesn't eliminate it entirely. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, it is important to lean towards organic, to try to avoid glyphosate or what is Roundup in our food. Although there are some organic foods that have been tested that have residues, but what we find is the lowest residues or zero are in organic as opposed to conventional foods. So organic, unfortunately, doesn't mean 100%. There can be some residues, but that's the best we can do. And there, either residues or very low levels. I know the Environmental Working Group in the past, I think it was 2018, maybe did a study of oat cereal and looked and tested a variety of oat cereals, all different brands, for glyphosates. And they found, that the largest amounts, many large amounts were in common oat cereals that we eat all the time. We feed our children, like Cheerios and Quaker Oats, and so the old-fashioned oats, etc. So the best, the very lowest, either zero or small residues, were in organic. So if we eat any products, and that this was just on oats, but it's, as you said, it's not just limited to oats, and you went down the list. And I think there was I saw one list that had orange juice on there, different brands of orange juice as well. But unfortunately, a lot of our foods, grains, are sprayed or exposed to intentionally to glyphosates, which are herbicides. And, we don't always know the long-term effect, but it is now known that cancer is a concern, and liver hepatotoxicity is concerned. Liver, I think somebody asked about the liver, and fertility issues as well. So it is really serious, and but because you don't always see signs of physical signs immediately, it's more of a cumulative effect. It's hard to pin down, but that did you mention the lawsuit in California, the gentleman that had a lawsuit and won for $289 million against Monsanto because he was a groundsman, I believe, at a school, and he used glyphosate almost every day. Many people use it in between cracks and for the weeds, at their homes. But at this building, taking care of the grounds of this school, he used this spray all the time, and he was eventually diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and all kinds of skin disorders. I've seen there's a video that has him on it as well, and he won this lawsuit, but then Monsanto has appealed and I think got it lessened, but that was a major one. But that's not the only type of cancer or chronic condition we're concerned about.
Yeah, that's correct. I've heard about that lawsuit. I hear there are a number of others that are in the queue against Monsanto. And regarding the liver detox, any chemical such as glyphosate can act as a toxin, and it can behave like a free radical. And free radicals create tissue damage, including liver tissue damage. So the answer to the question is that can it affect liver detox? It can, by just simply having a toxic effect on liver cells, even though it's not broken down by the liver, it's excreted in the feces. But the fact that it's in the bloodstream and circulating, it can have a toxic effect on any organ or tissue set, and so the liver is not necessarily spared. So yes, it can theoretically. So do glyphosates interfere with the liver's ability to remove toxin? If it impairs liver function, it does. So so to Catherine Welch, those answers to both of those is yes, it can. And I'm going to get to Veda's question next in just a minute, so you don't let me forget that one. Let me go through. So organic foods is one way to avoid long-term health risks. Short-term exposure to glyphosate isn't something you need to worry much about. Now, we can think about that in a minute. Expert says it's less toxic than table salt, but its long-term risk may be of concern. Science is divided on how much risk is involved. Reports show conflicting results. And keep in mind that most studies involve animals, not people. Now, before I go to this laundry list, short-term exposure. Now, if this substance is involved, is in all of our foods that we're eating on a regular basis, then it's hard to imagine that we're dealing with short-term exposure because you're consuming these foods regularly. That's one. Two, it's in your front lawn. It's on, it's in cotton, so you may be wearing clothes that have glyphosate in it. So you have a situation where this molecule is ubiquitous in our environment. So short-term exposure is not, I think it's an irrelevant concept because, if it's all like short-term exposure to air. It's like, okay, short-term exposure, it's all over the place. And so I think that if that were the case, if glyphosate was only in one location, that you had to avoid that location, and if you came across that location, maybe it's a certain rare mushroom that has glyphosate, and you touched it, and you had short-term exposure. Well, don't worry about that. But if you ate that mushroom every day, then you need to worry about that. Well, the problem is it's in the foods that we eat every day. And so given that, I don't think there's such thing as short-term exposure. Y'all, anybody have any different thoughts on that? I mean, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. So anyway, the laundry list is cancer. Some studies suggest glyphosate may be linked to cancer. Dr. Atkins mentioned a case where the lawsuit was won with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. Liver and kidney damage. Back to an earlier question, glyphosate may affect your kidney and liver. Studies in dairy cows eating a diet of soybeans with high levels of glyphosate had higher risk of liver and kidney damage. Now, think about the dairy cows. Now, when you have a mammalian animal, lots of toxins will accumulate in the mammary glands. And so if you're drinking milk of a cow that's eating glyphosate soybeans, then you're getting a high dose of that yourself. Reproductive and developmental issues. The EPA released a statement in 2020 that there was no evidence that glyphosate interfered with the endocrine system or hormones in humans. Dr. Atkins, do you have any data that is counter to that?
Well, there's one report I had from 2018, August 28, 2018, called Glyphosate in Foods, Complete List of Product Brands filled with popular cancer-causing weed killer. And but it lists the concerns about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, liver. It's been is associated with kidney and liver problems, reproductive problems, birth defects. And I'll have to look at the references for this article, but this is a while back. This is in 2018. And I think we have to look at the source of when studies are done, who's funding it, because that can influence the results that we've seen before in some of our discussions. So if the certain food industry is funding it, it may not be as open or as full disclosure, and may be slanted in some way, unfortunately. But so we need to be aware. They have seen glyphosate in the cord blood of babies, so it means we're getting it from the moms have it. So it's pretty diffuse, and even nuts and seeds and wheat and things of that nature. I know I've seen almonds, so when when I'm purchasing an almond product, almond butter or whatever, I try to find organic and try to find it in a glass bottle. That's hard to do both, but I mean, we need to be more aware. And so, but things have happened to our foods before it gets to us. And so it's not just to eat whole foods and live foods or fresh foods, but we really want to know, as Dr. Floyd says, that we have food security, know where our food comes from, ask a few questions, and or research it. But unfortunately, this is the world we live in.
Dr. Palmer, what's I'm hearing that cancer is among the leading cause of morbidity to mortality in young kids. What are you seeing in your practice?
Now I'm in general practice. In the hospital, I would see that more, but in general practice, I don't see it as much. But with the interesting thing about this is that the EPA sets levels of what's acceptable. And I think I saw somewhere that they use actually a 175-pound man to set these levels. So they're not even really taking children, pregnant women into consideration when they're kind of setting these levels. So, it kind of feels like the discussion that we had last week, where they are knowing that this could cause some harm, but let's just do it until we get enough lawsuits where we have to stop. Because in some of the information that I was looking through, it does say that the levels are much higher in children than their parents. So in the same family, when they've tested the children, their levels are higher than their parents in the same house. It is collecting more in children. As we know, children are still developing. Their organs are still detoxifying and doing the things they're supposed to do. Their brain is still developing. And so they won't put there is no level, there is no articles that are going to say that it absolutely causes a cancer, but the wording that they use is, I think, possible or probable carcinogenic is the wording that they use. So as you know, there is, I don't know the percentage of childhood cancers, but childhood cancers are increasing, and definitely the food, based on toxins being used in the food, can be a great contributor to cancers increasing in the pediatric population. Also, we are seeing some more non-alcoholic fatty livers and liver diseases in kids. Now, I do see that a lot because we're testing everybody's lipids, and I know some people in the hospital who work specifically in a clinic. They have a clinic that's dedicated just to that. And it's very busy. And so in trying to figure out what is causing this, we know that children are eating processed foods and junk foods that contribute to it. You wouldn't think that that would push it this far. And so toxins can also contribute, which may be what's pushing it over. So there are definite changes happen in the pediatric population. Nobody has said it's specifically glyphosate, but if we have so much evidence, then it's hard to not think about it as a top contender. And I think, like Dr. Atkins said, the environmental working group has tried to ask that they stop using glyphosate, but those asks have been ignored.
Yeah, and while you have the floor, Dr. Palmer, JWS, they've heard about heavy metals in baby food like Gerber. What do you tell parents of your patients? They're trying to rekindle our baby food debate from back in the
There's always been, unfortunately, I know this sounds bad, but there's always been like heavy metals in baby food. I know that sounds bad, but I don't think that's new. And again, they allow certain things in baby food, and they allow certain things in baby formula, and they allow certain things in our food. So this was the reason why I stopped eating a long time ago when I was not, plant-based. I stopped eating tuna because I read somewhere that they let a certain amount of rat hair in the tuna. And I was like, what? That kind of blew my world. I wasn't in love with tuna anyway. So that was just a good excuse to say I can't do it anymore. So
certain amount of rat hair. Okay, that's good. I guess that enhances the flavor.
Well, because when they catch the tuna and it's on the dock, they're animals running in between, and hairs come out, and they can't sift it out. I mean, it's reality. And so, but I just happened to read that, and it just totally flipped my world upside down. So
well, who gives a rat's blank about it rat hair anyway?
Pun intended, huh?
Just eat the tuna.
So I'm saying that to say there's always been a certain level, some heavy metals, I think, and there's some I think I've read arsenic too, certain levels of arsenic in baby products. In the formula, I know, but it's at a level where they are saying it's okay. And I often tell my parents about this, and I tell them just to make your own food. I mean, it's going to take you an extra step, but that's the answer. You have to make it yourself. Now, we're talking about foods being sprayed, and that would put another level of, okay, make sure that you're getting something that's organic and non-GMO. But I don't promote baby foods to my patients at all. Never. I don't. No. So, yes, what'd you say?
We're going to rekindle this baby formula debate we had back when we had the baby formula. I remember somebody saying, make your own food. He got jumped on, but I'm not going to come up.
No, but keeping it simple, meaning if you are fixing something for yourself,
yeah,
then, take a small portion of that. Don't put any butter and salt, pepper, don't season it, and just do that piece for the baby. So whatever you're making for yourself, because the baby needs the same needs nutrients. So, I often tell them to start with veggies anyway. So the first 6 months when we start eating, we're doing veggies. So whatever you're eating veggie wise, put some on for the baby, puree it, make it safe as far as the texture for them. And that's what you use.
Organic and non-GMO. This question we touched upon, but what are some of the ways the body naturally expels those toxins? Does drinking alkaline water regularly help to expedite the process? Alkalinize the body helps in general, but we talk about heavy metals and oxidative stress. You want to things like zeolite or diatomaceous earth or benton clay can bind a lot of heavy metals in the gut, so that's one way. Toxins in general create oxidative stress, and so large amounts of antioxidants will help leafy greens, sea vegetables, and the like. Those things help in terms of stabilizing the free radicals. These molecules contribute to damage by creating free radicals, and you need to stabilize those free radicals. So the first line of defense is to avoid them, minimize. The first step in nutrition is what you don't eat. So, reduce your levels of glyphosate as well as other toxic chemicals to the extent you can. And then even on organic or maybe naturally grown things, you have trace amounts. So even you're bringing a lower amount in. So then you use the healthy nutrients of the healthy food to then combat the toxic effect of the small amounts of these chemicals that come in. So you hit it for the two-pronged method: reduce the intake, ingestion of it as low as possible, and bring in high nutrients that can help your body fight it off or stabilize it. Let's see. Jasmine, I've heard that washing fruits and veggies for a few minutes in baking soda cleans up toxins greatly, over 90%. And washing clothes and brush your teeth with baking soda, could this help? So what do y'all say about baking soda?
Well, I'll just say something quickly, Dr. Atkins. That will be the skin, the outside, but these chemicals are absorbed into the bodies of the soil and also of the fruits and the vegetables. So you end up in the same place because you're only washing the outside.
I agree.
So Tex Houston talks about Joseph Pizzonro. His book, The Toxin Solution, talks about kidney detox and says ginkgo biloba is used to help with glyphosate toxicity on the kidneys. Anybody want to comment on that?
I'm not familiar with that method of detox, but ginkgo biloba helps dilate small blood vessels, so improve circulation. So if you're trying to improve circulation to those small blood vessels, like the brain as well. But yeah, I agree. To remove glyphosates, I mean, it can be very helpful for the things to take the supplements that bind to toxins like the zeolite, as you mentioned, the bentonite and clay, diatomaceous earth, and things of that nature. And, just trying to make changes and not keep reintroducing the wrong foods that are toxic in. I have a reference article I just wanted to mention when I have a chance. I don't know.
Now, if you have anything you want to share a screen, feel free to do so.
I have it on another computer, so I apologize. I didn't have it on this computer.
Oh, no problem.
But it's called Breakfast with a Dose of Roundup with a question mark, and it says weed killer in 289 million cancer verdict found in oat cereal and granola bars. And this is Wednesday, August 15th, 2018 by a toxicologist, Dr. Alexis Timken, T-E-M as in Mary, K-I-M. But and that's an interesting article, and actually she tests the levels for different foods, mainly oat cereal, some orange juices and things like that. But it says in her discussion, it says that the Environmental Working Group, EWG, calculated.
Oh, you froze.
0.01 milligrams of glyphosate per day. To reach this maximum dose, one would only have to eat a single 60-gram serving of food with glyphosate levels of 160 parts per billion, or ppb. The majority of the samples of the conventional oat products from the EWG study exceeded the 160. And so,
yeah, I'm looking at that article now.
Yeah, how much, when you say how much is too much, I mean, it's like how much poison is too much, or how much radiation is too much, something that's toxic to our body. It's hard to have acceptable amounts, but clearly they're too much in these products. And this article, if anybody goes to it has a whole list of foods and what their test results are, and many of the things you'll recognize in here, the foods and brands you'll recognize here. But there were some that had none detected ND or very. I don't know if I went out. I don't know how much.
Yeah,
how
you
much,
blanked out just a minute there.
Yeah, but so anyway, but that's a good article, good reference article, and you can see how they tested some of these foods.
I'm
How
going to
these
put
foods
that.
tested.
I'm going to place that on a banner,
Okay.
and so and that'll give you a chance to take a look at it, and also put it on a sticker.
Another kind of natural way to detox it, your body is a sauna. And if you don't have one, is just going, it's been hot, just going out and sweating. I think that's what other cultures do, sweat lodges. And, you know, they go places where they let their pores open and let toxins come out. We don't do that as a tradition over here, but I think it's something that, I mean, of course we have spas that we can go to, but I think it's something that we should probably start thinking about again and getting back to doing the simple things.
Yeah, I agree, and especially getting outdoors, fresh air, sunshine. This is the time of year to do it. But even during the winter times in certain parts, you know, we live in the South, and certain parts of the country, it's not unreasonable to go out even during the winters. We have mild winters, of course. A place where you don't have mild winters, it's, you know, another thing. So getting a sauna or going to a gym with a sauna during those times would be very helpful. But I think it's important for us to focus and be very intentional about our health, be intentional about what we eat, especially about what we eat, because, you know, again, toxin. This is just one example we wanted to discuss, to give an example of how ubiquitous these things are in our environment. And so we have to be aware, because oftentimes people come in with health conditions and, well, you know, I eat healthy and you know, I'm reasonable, I do things in moderation, but yet I have high blood pressure or my kidneys are failing or whatever the case is. Well, these toxins are building up in our system. And it's not just the people who are eating, you know, fast food every day. You know, people eating the slow, so-called healthy food are consuming foods that you think are healthy, but are loaded with these chemicals because of the processing, because of how things are raised. And that's why, you know, we use the food classification system in terms of informing people how to select food that's grown in a natural environment, how to avoid foods that's over processed. Not only once you get it from the supermarket, but foods are overly processed before it gets to the supermarket. And this is an example of how that's done. So, you know, backyard gardening, growing your own food, getting, you know, controlling your soil. You can't do everything. We understand that, but you take, you know, every 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step. And so you have to take that first step, and the next step after that, you continue to educate yourself. You continue to make smart decisions. You know, start shopping at your local farmers markets. You know, getting organic, getting local, sustainably grown, growing as much as you can yourself. Doing time restricted eating, so you have fasting periods. The body can heal itself during fasting periods. So there are a lot of different approaches to this. And so we don't want to give you this information to overwhelm you with doom and gloom and make it seem like it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. You just have to wake up and be conscious and be intentional about how you live your life. We're intentional about a lot of things. You know, people, you know, we go buy a car, they do all sorts of things buying a car. It's probably buying a car, probably the worst investment you can make. People spend weeks and months, you know, searching and looking for prices and analyzing, go and drive, test drive, and kicking the tires and all that stuff. And, you know, before they buy a car, but then they go and get something to eat, and they just, you know, go over to some random fast food place and grab something and put it in their mouth. And so, you know, there your body, what is your body worth compared to your car? You know, it's worth, you know, infinitely more. But we take a great care in choosing our car and taking care of our car, and we have little thought in terms of how we take care of our bodies. And we need to flip that. We need to flip that very soon.
Can I respond to Tiffany put in a statement, Johnson Robbins, about, and you put it highlighted, babies only need, yeah. So yes, that's why I said 6 months. I try to get mommies to breastfeed for the first 6 months, and some will do it, and some have difficulty because they have to return to work. It's rare that I see somebody go all the way to 9 months with just exclusively breastfeeding. Now, breast milk, in addition to foods, I try to get them to do for 2 years, but exclusive breastfeeding, definitely 6 months. 9 months becomes a little bit more difficult for mommies because the demand here in the States on mothers, they got to go back to work. So they're not as relaxed. They're not producing as much milk. The baby is requiring more because a 9-month-old is very active. So that reality doesn't happen a lot here in the United States, but I'm sure it's possible. But most of the time here, we say 6 months.
Great information.
I wanted to say one thing.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say I agree with Dr. Palmer about the sweating. And that's a great way to detox, to sweat. And I think in, especially African American communities and other communities, it's like we don't want to sweat, and we live in air conditioning in the summertime, and we're air conditioning cars, but it is very natural to sweat, and it's detoxifying. So I think we can't underestimate it. And you don't have to have an expensive go to a health club or have an expensive sauna. You don't have to, but just to sweat is a great thing, and it removes toxins. I mean, you lose minerals, and you should replace them when you sweat and hydrate. But I think that's excellent to think about, and so we need to encourage that more often. And so we may have to take more showers, but that's a great way to detox.
Excellent statement. That's what I mean. Sweating and moving about are this simple. I mean, we're talking about very simple things.
So Veda says sweating messes up our hair, makeup, and our clothing.
Well, it's better to walk around with messed up makeup, messed up hair than glyphosate in your your body. I remember I was a medical student, and I was on a neurosurgical service, and it was a very harsh attending. He was pretty harsh on the residents. So I remember there's a resident, and he was getting on a case about, I forget, she didn't answer a page in time or something. And, she was on call, on call, you sleep at the hospital. And so she said, well, I had to brush my teeth or something like that. He says, better for your teeth to fall out.
But no, on a real, in a practical sense, though, really, you go and do it as if you're going to the gym, right? Yeah. You put on your sweats, you pull your hair back, you wash your face, and you go sit outside. So you're not doing it as you're heading to work, because nobody wants to see you just coming out of a sunbathing session, coming into work and you're sweaty. But no, on a serious note, you do it as if you're going to the gym, and you just let your body just sweat.
Yeah. Of course, that's probably why a lot of people aren't going to the gym. They're always in makeup and their hair made up. But you're right. And again, speaking of makeup, I mean, a lot of makeups have toxins in them. So it's heavy metals and things like that. So, and people put chemicals in their hair. So maybe you should make up your hair and put no makeup on to start with. So that's probably the problem. It's an interesting, I never thought about that statement. We can't go out and sweat because we got a hair made up, makeup on. Well, you got hair made up with toxic chemicals in your hair, and you got toxic paint on your face. And so you can't go and do anything to remove the toxin because you're too busy. You got toxin plastered all over your body. What do y'all think about that?
Where you're going into multiple levels of complexity. Because I think, again, once you get toxins removed from your body, then your need to use more makeup decreases, right? As you get things, because now your skin will clear some. I'm not saying it's going to be what you wanted, but it will clear some because now the toxins are not just in your system, because our skin reflects kind of what's going on the inside, right? So that is, again, detoxifying the body altogether. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, I just, like to say, I know, in the African American community, we don't want to sweat our hair out and change our hairstyle, but I think more and more women and men are choosing more natural hairstyles, that, you want to maybe find a hairstyle that is sweat friendly, and light makeup. And when you choose makeup, you want to buy makeup that is more non-toxic from a health food store, or there's some online, but have more natural ingredients. There are also even heavy metals in some makeup and heavy powders like lead and other things like that, and some lipsticks and petroleum product based lipsticks, as opposed to beeswax or castor oil in natural ones. So we can be beautiful, I tell my patients, but more light makeup and more natural hairstyles that are not such as much of a big deal when we sweat. We don't want to live for our hairstyles, but we want our hairstyles to embrace our healthy living and makeup.
So what do you think about a Facebook user who's anonymous? I believe breast milk has the same toxin with other we eat. However, I believe the mother filters out the toxins. Well, I think the toxins build up in the fat mammary glands, so it's going to build up in the breast.
And that's Dr. Atkins said that they have studies when they have found glyphosate in newborns. So it is passed to the baby.
And see, we see atherosclerosis in babies in utero. And so, this passed on. So once you do a transition, give your child calcium, maybe mothers.
That's about.
You want to address that?
I will quickly. So because I'm plant-based, I don't endorse cow's milk for any human. But I'm the only one in my practice that does that. So when you go to any pediatrician, they're going to talk to you about cow's milk. So I take a totally different stance on that. Calcium is in our vegetables. As we know, that's where the cow herself gets her calcium. She doesn't drink milk. Most mammals outside of the newborn period, so I'll just give a brief spiel. Outside of the newborn period, we are the only mammals on the planet that's still drinking somebody else's milk. We're not even drinking our own milk. So that's abnormal within itself. Calcium is in the plants, and that's where the cow gets her calcium. We look at the hippopotamus, we look at the giraffe, and I'm naming these animals because they're humongous. They get their protein, they get their calcium, they get their riboflavins, they get everything from the vegetation. So the fact, us thinking that calcium is only in milk is false. But it helps the milk industry to keep thriving. So yes, so I tell parents, if you want your child to have cereal, now we're talking about the glyphosate in cereal, but let's say you have something that you want to put milk in, you can use milk substitutes or alternatives. It does not have the same fat content, so you cannot do a direct substitution if you're thinking you're using it for calorie intake. But if you're using it to kind of appease your mind and appease your babysitter's mind and appease the daycare, because a lot of time people are going to give you a lot of pushback because you're not giving your child milk and they think something is wrong. So to make that not be so heavy on you, you can use the alternatives if you know your child doesn't have any nut allergies, because a lot of the alternatives are nuts, coconut. Now they have hemp seed milk, they have rice milk. So you can use these alternatives. Again, these are not the same calorie content as cow milk. So, but in the event that you use plants, you need to absolutely plant-based milk. You need to absolutely have your child eating vegetables. So now you need to concentrate on making sure that your child is eating properly and eating a well-rounded diet or meal, which includes a lot of vegetables.
Great point. Great point. And with that, we'll wrap it up. There's a large comment by this Facebook user comment is pretty interesting. Stay out of cold air so you can sweat better. They make a reference to the song "Summer Breeze Makes Me Feel Fine," which again, that's probably something to that. But I've been out in the sun a fair amount this summer. Probably still not as much as I should be, but certainly more than usual. And I remember on Father's Day, I was cutting tree branches, and I remember feeling, wow, this feels good, nice breeze, a very comfortable day out. And the next thing I knew, I looked at my phone, and the temperature was like 103, but it felt very comfortable. And so, of course, I was well hydrated and what have you, but it was still, something that I noticed that was, very comfortable, and I was out working and sweating. And so as you get used to it, it becomes natural, and it starts to really feel good. And these things are what we should naturally
Can I add something?
gravitate to.
Can I add something briefly, Dr.
Oh,
Montgomery? And so with going outside, because now the children are saying they don't want to go outside because it's too hot. And yes, you have to go outside in order to adapt to being outside. And I think I read several years ago about the nephrons in the kidneys grow longer when you're in heat to store more water. And so you have to let that physiological process happen. So the first day or two, you might be miserable, but as you keep going, you'll feel better. And also, this is on the backdrop of eating properly, meaning your fruits and vegetables. These are the foods that have water in them that give your cells water. And so when you go out, it will adapt, versus if you're eating French fries, that oil that you're eating in the French fries probably clogs up the pores, and you're going to feel suffocated and hot. So I also feel you can't just go, you need to be prepped to be able to do it properly and not feel like you're suffering while you're out there. Meaning eating your fruit and vegetables so that you can sweat properly, and you eventually will start to feel better out there, versus feeling like you're suffocating because you're eating pizza and French fries and potato chips, because that's a horrible experience.
That's it, right. Proper hydration and elimination of toxic foods are two key things. And that's why people are allergic to the outdoors or can't tolerate the outdoors, because, what's inside your body is not sufficient to allow you to adapt to that natural environment. It's not natural to be allergic to nature. So if you are, then you need to make some adjustment in what you're consuming first and foremost. And I think that'll help make things much better for you. Well, this is great, colleagues. Thank you very much for an enlightening discussion. We talked about glyphosate, but we use that as a focal point of our discussion. But it really applies to everything. And so thank you very much for your enlightenment, Drs. Atkins and Dr. Palmer. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. I'll see you backstage as we close out for another Monday. Well, anyway, as usual, I learned a lot in these discussions. I hope you learned the same. If you haven't had a chance to do so, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, and share. Subscribe if you hadn't had a chance to subscribe. And of course, as I said, share this with loved ones, friends, and anyone who would benefit from this information. We appreciate your support. Thanks for joining us tonight. And until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.